Hello and welcome to ArtShow. I'm Craig Stover, and today I have with me Jerome China. Hey, Jerome, how are you today?
I'm well, thanks. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You
Glad we
excited?
had an opportunity. Glad we could finally make this happen.
Yeah, quite so. So I'm eager to start right away and share some images of yours. So you did send me some images, but I really wanted to talk about this series that you did. I really, I love I love everything about this. So I'm hoping you can tell me just a few words about this particular piece.
I've been thinking about it for, I don't know, probably for like the last 5 to 7 years about the Middle Passage, the transatlantic slave trade, etc.
Mhm.
And I have a lot of friends who visited, like Guyana, and I've seen them go through the doors of no return. So, and I've always wanted to do something in relationship to that part of African American history. So I came up with this series called The Doors of No Return series. So I went online, took a look at some of the doors in different places, and I wouldn't say I recreated some of them, and some of them are like pretty much my own design.
Mhm.
So that's what this series is. That's how this series got started, and so far I think I'm up to like 10 pieces.
I
But
was
I
going to ask
also
how many. Yeah.
yeah, well, I'm up to 10 pieces, but I don't post a lot of my artwork online, but the pieces that I have posted up, they've had like really favorable responses.
Hmm.
So I think for me, I think that this is going to be an ongoing series.
Hmm.
That I'll just keep going.
So
So that's Go
for
ahead.
the people who are watching this, can you tell me what size am I looking at here? Because that could really.
You're probably looking at, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that one is probably like 17 by 8. So some of them are larger and some of them are smaller. So
Okay.
I had an artist friend of mine come by, and when he actually saw these, he was like, "Well, these are a lot larger than I thought they were going to be."
Mm.
So it all depends on, and also, size really depends on the materials that I have
Yeah.
on hand as well.
Yeah. For me, they're actually smaller than I thought they were going to be. So that's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. So my wife actually wants a larger one, and I'm like, hey, listen, I'm not going to be making a prison size door for you. So
Well, I love the materials, the patinas. Do you do anything to the metals to give them that patina, or do you find them the materials that way?
a lot of these I patinaed them myself using acid and hydrogen peroxide.
Okay.
A lot of materials that I work with, come rusted already.
Hmm.
But for these, I wanted to, just play with the patina a little bit more to give them, kind of almost an older feel, and some people have described some of these as haunting.
Hmm.
So I wanted to give that feel. So when you're actually looking at the door, you can kind of like imagine yourself going through those doors
Hmm.
with the history behind the slave trade, and basically never returning to your native land.
Yeah.
So that
I
was
would
it.
love to.
And
I'd love to see an exhibit of all of these once you have, a
yeah,
good.
so I have a collector coming over later today, who works for a very well-known nonprofit in Jersey City. So I think that she's going to add three of these to her collection.
That would be great.
But when I eventually put these on the market for acquisition, one of the things that will be in the contract is that if I need to show the piece that you've acquired, that you would let me show it so
Yeah,
that
oh yeah,
I can
yeah.
actually see like a group of them together.
That should be in all your contracts. So speaking of having something in their collection, do you still own this one?
Yes, I still own this one.
This is fantastic. I love the negative shapes. I'd love to see this in the round. I'd love to see all the angles of this piece. And In particular, the question I first had about this title that you have, this is called I'm Not Picasso.
Correct.
Is that right? So do your titles come before, during, or after normally its creation?
They usually come during and after. So I never go in. I mean, I have a list of artwork titles that eventually I'll make art to match that, because I just, I come up
Do you
with
write
these
them down?
titles.
Do you keep a
Yeah,
list?
I write the titles down because I was like, okay, this might make a really good title for a piece of artwork. So I have like a list of titles,
Yeah.
but a lot of the work, a lot of the titles come during the work, and it comes after the work. And I have like, quite a few things that I put together that have like no titles, because I just can't think of a title for them. And I'm also getting to the point in my artistic journey. I know people like to see titles of things, but I'm just not so sure, for me, that everything needs to have a title
Oh
to it.
yeah, yeah. I totally get it because, a title can really push a piece in one direction or another. And sometimes
Right.
you don't want that. You just want the piece to speak for itself.
Correct. And then also when you're doing abstract work, you
Oh
want
yeah.
people to bring their own experiences to the piece. And
Exactly.
somebody, I may name the piece something, and someone else will look at it and they'll see something totally different, even that I didn't know about.
Yeah.
So, but a lot of the pieces are named, but I'm not so hung up on like coming up with a name for a piece. And then sometimes it takes like a year, and then it'll
Yeah.
hit me. Oh, that's the name of that piece.
Yeah. I teach, and oftentimes my students are shocked when I talk to them about, like, well, titling is a new invention. Like, Demoiselles Avignon was not titled by Picasso by that. That's curators and collectors. That's people who own.
Right.
They often titled it. Only now do we like, oh, let's, human number 5 or something crazy. So I chose this piece because I would love to see the shadows that this particular piece makes. I'm loving all of the negative shapes that are in there. It's almost like you're drawing in space.
That's pretty interesting, because it was David Smith, a sculptor,
Mhm.
who I take that it was either David Smith or Julio Gonzalez who coined the phrase "drawing in space with metal." So,
Mhm.
one of the goals with being a metal sculptor is, even though sculpture is considered three-dimensional, sometimes it can actually look like a two-dimensional piece.
Oh yeah. Mhm.
So, I'm learning to actually draw in space where you can actually like walk around the work, and
Mhm.
from different views, from different angles, you'll get a different view of the work. So it's interesting that you bring up the term drawing in space, because that's exactly what I'm trying to achieve as I move through my career.
I can see it. I mean, I picked up the same sort of desire, but mine came from Matisse because of the drawing with scissors that he used to do, and I love sort of doing that. So they're very sort of connected. Nice piece. And lastly, I love this little gem. Um, can you tell me just a little bit about this? I want to know more.
So this piece is called "Pieces from My Neighborhood." So, as you may notice, I work in found and reclaimed scrap metal.
Mhm.
So, this piece basically came about me walking around my neighborhood over the years and just picking up pieces or that I found on the ground,
Mhm.
and hence the name "Pieces from My Neighborhood." The thing that I like about reclaimed scrap metal is that it has, all of it has its own history. From when it was first created, who it's touched, where it's been, and I really appreciate that part about found metal and found objects, because it had a history before you had your hands on it. And
Mhm.
what you're doing, or what I feel that I'm doing, is I'm giving it a second life.
Mhm.
So this is basically all scrap metal that I found, walking around my neighborhood, which I do often. So
Mhm. I would love to see your stockpile. you must have a giant pile of ready to go materials.
Well, actually, the stockpile is actually not as big as it was
Okay.
because, well, because there are times where I've had what I would consider like too much metal,
Okay.
and then I kind of like want to create things to get rid of it so I can actually collect some more. But
Mm,
I'm fortunate enough to have somewhat of a storage space in my backyard where I can, just throw scraps of metal on. But it used to be a lot larger. Yeah, so there's always something lying around that I can put together, cut
yeah.
apart, reshape if I have to, etc.
So I'd like to start. I'd like to back up and learn a little bit about your start in the arts. One of the questions I'd like to ask is, do you have any memories being a child and having a first exposure to arts? Something that just sort of maybe stopped you in your tracks, or maybe something that always stuck with you?
Oh yeah. So where I grew up, there unfortunately there are not a lot of arts after school arts programs these days for kids that are free. So I was fortunate enough to be a part of an after school arts program that was held in the basement of a church.
Okay.
And the guys who ran that after school program, they, unbeknownst to me at the time, they had opened up the first African American art gallery in Virginia, in the state of Virginia.
Nice.
And
Okay.
they
That's
purchased
fortuitous.
this huge house across the street from a park, and
Mhm.
the first floor was gallery,
Mm.
and then the second floor was like they had a dark room, and they were like all musicians and artists. So I had an opportunity to go to their after school program,
Mhm.
and that's kind of where I started learning about art. But as a kid, I used to do a lot of drawing,
Mhm.
but this is the first time that was the first time that I had what I would consider a structured class
That's
of
fantastic.
artists. And so they were artists and musicians. So as a kid, it was just an amazing time. They were really welcoming. They would
Yeah.
invite the kids to their house for like concerts and sassafras tea and tie dyeing and
Is it
photography.
is it still there?
No, the musicians are still around.
Okay.
But that gallery is no longer there. It's probably it's in a historic district in there, so I'm pretty sure that someone actually lives in that house now. So yeah, so
So
it's not there.
speed me up a little bit. At what point did you decide to become an artist?
Well, I actually did decide to become an artist. Because I actually started welding in 2014, I believe.
Hmm.
And that was only because I wanted to make a metal sculpture from my backyard.
Hmm.
That was my only purpose in this whole welding thing. I wanted to make a sculpture for the backyard. And once I started it, so over the course of I think 4 weekends, I finished my first sculpture for the backyard. And when I brought it home, my wife, like she just couldn't believe that that came from me. I didn't see
Okay.
anything really special about it other than, like the size.
Mhm.
So she was like, this is probably something that, you should probably, keep trying to pursue.
Mhm. Mhm.
So the shop
Did
that
you
I
have
was, go
did
ahead.
you have somebody teach you those fabrication processes, or were you self-taught in that regard?
I had someone who taught me how to weld.
Hmm. Okay.
So it was a fabrication shop here that was located here in Jersey City.
Mhm.
And I basically wore them down. I went there like every day for like 3 months, so they could teach me how to weld because
Okay.
they were actually making artwork out of scrap metal,
Hmm. Okay.
and that really fascinated me. So I basically wore them down. They decided to give me some classes, and
Mhm.
after I couldn't afford to pay for classes anymore, I made a deal with them that I would open up their shop on the weekends, and I would
Mhm.
just be an order taker for
Mhm.
them. So they would come in on Monday. They would have all these projects. And so I was in there. I was there on the weekends. I would go to the studio and be there like 12 hours a day,
Mhm.
just like practicing my craft.
Good for you.
I would consider myself their first artist in residency there.
Put that right on your resume. That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
it was a 2-year run.
Yeah. Whatever you can do to get it done. That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
So when you're making your work, I'm curious to know how much of your work is planned out ahead of time versus experimentation or play during the process. Like, do you ever sketch out your works ahead of time, or is it more of I have these materials, I have a rough idea? How does it work?
Yeah, I have a few sketches, but I very rarely sketch out things because the materials that I use are so random.
Mhm.
It's very hard to, and I mean, I could fabricate some things if I really needed to, which means I would have to probably buy the materials, which I'm generally not thrilled about when I have to buy materials. I'd rather spend the money of equipment.
Oh yeah,
So very few of the work is like really planned out. Like with the Door series, that's somewhat planned
because you have an
because
idea,
I have an
right?
idea of like what I'm going to do.
But
But
you
for a
give
lot
yourself
of
freedoms.
Right. But a lot of the work is like totally unplanned. So I started this process to force myself to work with what I have.
Hmm.
I would go to my scrap bin and I would put like 15 pieces of metal on the table.
Hmm.
And I would only make a sculpture out of those pieces. Now,
Hmm.
those pieces could be bent, they could be manipulated, they could be cut in half, but I only had to work with the materials that were on the table without going to the scrap bin.
Hmm. Hmm. I get
So
it.
that taught me to kind of not look too far ahead, wishing that I had a particular piece so that
Hmm.
this piece could be finished, but just making something out of, basically what you have on hand.
I totally relate. I mean, it's the same process for making collage for me. So you have what you have. So what can you make out of what you have? So
Right.
I'm a little,
It's a really great exercise.
I'm curious to know if you have anything like a wellspring to your creativity. In other words, you go into the studio, you're going to make something. Do you find that you have anything like that's a kind of a go-to? As an example, I have artists that will say, "Well, my ideas come from literature," and somebody else will say, "Mine comes from nature," or "I have to take a walk first," or something. Is there anything that gets your creativity moving?
Um, I
Or are
think
you
it's all
so
of that. It's literature, it's nature. One of my friends goes, if you're ever stuck as an artist, just go back to nature
Mhm.
because there's just so many interesting things in it. And I also draw a lot of inspiration from a lot of my other artist friends. They are multidisciplinary artists. A lot of my artist friends are abstract artists, so
Mhm.
I get a lot of inspiration from them and then I'll just go into the studio and have nothing in mind and just basically start welding pieces together. So, I'll tack weld them together to see if they
Mhm.
kind of like fit and balance. And then I'll just go from there. And the next thing you know, in like a couple of hours, there's like a sculpture. So I think the most important part is, when it comes to like inspiration, I think the most important thing is just getting started,
Do
you
you
know.
have find that when you're making your work that you can do you are you completely tuned in or are you completely tuned out? Like does it is almost like a highway hypnosis kind of a thing? You're just working.
No, for me, it's totally meditative. So like when I'm in it, what I would call a zone,
Hmm.
I could be in my studio, pretty much like all day and walk out with like, two or three completed sculptures.
Mm.
But that's like, that's being in your studio, like 16 hours,
Hmm.
but when I'm there, I'm like totally in the zone. So, I'll have like, some jazz going on in the background
Hmm.
or some house music or something like that.
Hmm.
But I'm totally focused because in what I do, if you lose focus for, like a second, you could really get injured.
Oh yeah. Hmm. I I work with paint, so that it doesn't really bite me as
Yeah,
bad.
there have been times where I've looked down because welding creates quite a bit of sparks. So
Yeah.
there are times where, like, I finished welding and there's still smoke, and I'm like, "Where's this smoke coming from?" And then I take a look down, and my pant leg is on fire. So
Do you ever consider the works that you make to be like autobiographical in any nature, or are they totally separate from your life?
um, I think some of the work is I don't know if it's autobiography when it actually speaks to me, but some of the works, certainly speaks to the times that we're in.
Hmm.
So some of the work really captures the moment of the times that we're in. So if it's autobiography about me, not so much, but some of the work does talk about some of the times that we're currently in.
So when you're making your work, do you think about your audience at all while you're making the work?
Never.
No, it's just about your own creativity and the
Yeah, because
images.
if you start, for me at least, if I start thinking about making things for the outside world, if you will,
Uh-huh.
um, I start thinking that, that leads to always being concerned of making something, thinking to yourself in the back of your head, if I make this, are people going to like it?
Hmm.
Is it going to sell? And
Hmm.
I just never have those thoughts because my studio is the only place on earth that I don't have to compromise.
Hmm. Nice.
So it's a very sacred place. And
Hmm.
in life, there are a lot of compromises. If you're married, there's you have to compromise to get along with your partner. If you
Hmm.
have a job, you have to compromise to get along with your coworkers. But in my studio, I don't have to compromise.
So if you're not concerned with your audience, oftentimes I found this can be true. Are you ever shocked by some of the things that audiences say about your work? Or
Um, hey Craig, if I'm really honest, I
yeah.
don't care what they say about the work.
Okay.
So another artist friend of mine, who says that you just make the work, and you shouldn't. You have to get to a point in your career where if people like the work, great. If they don't like the work, great.
Hmm.
And I've seen a lot of artists, a lot of my artist colleagues who are like devastated if their work is not received well. I mean, literally, like,
Yeah.
I suggest therapy
Uh-huh.
because they're just so broken. And I just don't have that. I make the work because I have to make it as an artist.
Hmm.
And at the time when I'm making it work, whatever I'm making is true and real for me at the time.
Hmm.
So I never think about the audience. I'm grateful that
Hmm.
I found the audience for my work. There's no doubt about it, and that all happened, because I was in the right place at the right time.
Hmm.
Some luck, some mentoring. So I'm very happy that I have the audience that I have. But I don't make works for audience. Like I don't make works for theme exhibitions. I only did that one time.
Yeah.
So if someone comes in with an exhibition and I have to make something for a theme, I'm probably not going to participate.
Yeah. I'm not a big theme person myself. So if
Yeah.
the works are really generated more for you or by you or with you, uh, do you ever find that you get to a point where you're making something and you find that it's just not working? So do you ever destroy your works?
Absolutely. At
Yeah.
one point in my career, I never used to destroy work. I don't know why that was, but
Okay.
if I'm not happy with the way something is, I may make a piece, and there's just something that's not right about the piece in my mind that it's
Hmm.
not completed. And I have been known to and now if I don't like it, because I let it sit on the table for a couple of days and look at it and kind of like determine if it's complete for me. But I've been known now, if I don't like it, I just take it apart
Hmm.
because I tack weld everything before I
Right.
permanently weld, so I
Okay.
can easily pull it apart. So
And then
I've been
reuse
I've
those
been
pieces.
known to I've been known to like disassemble things and recreate something totally different.
Do you have any studio rituals? So you did mention that you normally have like jazz on or anything like that, or do you have
I
anything
can't
else?
speak about those rituals publicly,
Okay,
but
that's
I
fair enough. Fair enough.
but I do have a few rituals. So before one of the rituals before I go into the studio is I'll sit outside of the studio and I'll meditate for like 10 minutes before I actually go in and start.
that
So
is,
that I can clear my head.
yeah, yeah. I asked that question of a number of artists, and it's wonderful to see the wide variety of answers. I love yours about the meditation, but meditation I found can also be done in a variety of ways. I had an artist that I interviewed, and she said that she destroys her studio when she works. So her process is the first thing she does when she goes into her studio is she meditates by cleaning up her studio. And it takes her like 20 minutes every day. And I just love that sort of process. You never know what's going to
Yeah, that
happen.
could be. Yeah, my meditation is mostly just like really quiet meditation, so that I can like clear my head.
How often are you in your studio?
Is well, I actually just built a small studio in my backyard, so
Okay.
I'm in there like quite a bit. So I try to get into my studio like 3 or 4 times a week.
Okay.
I used to want to be in there like every day,
Uh-huh.
because I felt that I had to as an artist, but I don't feel that way anymore. Because I've actually gone like months and have not been in my studio
Mm-hmm.
because during those months I just didn't have anything to say.
I get
You
you.
know,
Do you ever get itchy though? Like, "Ooh, I haven't made anything in a while. I feel like no.
no, I used to not so much. Now that I have my own space, I can actually get up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and actually go into my studio. I wouldn't be working with power tools
Mhm.
because I have neighbors and I like to be respectful of their sleep. But sometimes I used to get antsy about that, but not so much anymore because
Okay.
as an artist, sometimes you just don't have anything to say,
Yeah, I get it.
or yeah, you don't have anything to say, or whatever it is that you may have to say, you can't say it with the materials that you're using. I think that's the frustrating part with me
Mm,
right now,
mhm.
is that I have other things that I want to say, but I just can't say it in metal.
So that
So,
leads me to my final question. What does making art do for you?
what does art do for me? That's a really good question. It keeps me alive.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, if I couldn't make art, and if I didn't have the sanctuary of my studio or this creative outlet, especially with everything that's going on in the world, and and all the angst and all the worry, if I didn't have that, I think I would just be like, you'd have to like lock me up in like an asylum. I actually like need to make work and be creative.
Mhm.
I do believe that art saves lives. When I take a look at children who have gone through some kind of arts program, whether it's visual arts or music,
Mhm.
they generally turn out to be really cool kids.
Well, I can see that with your own art program going through, so that makes sense to me. Well, Jerome, I had a fantastic time talking with you. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk to me today about your work. And I also want to thank everybody who tuned into Art Show today to watch Jerome and I have a conversation about his work. Your support, your liking, sharing, and of course, subscribing really helps keep Art Show moving. So we want to thank you for doing that. And again, Jerome, thank you for spending some time with me today. I really
Hey,
appreciate it.
Craig, thanks for having me, and I hope I run into you soon somewhere.
I'm sure we'll meet up. Take care.
All right, thank you.